Hey guys, I'm BradBuilds and welcome back to the channel. In the last episode, we got rid of the decrepit door seals. We sanded down a bunch of paint and rust in the engine bay, including like the radiator support rails right here, the frame, crumple zones. We hoisted the car up by the engine stand, pulled the entire front end out, and this is where we are today. So some of the things we're gonna be doing today is we're gonna be trying out that rust solvent that I ordered in the last episode, see if it breaks down the rust that won't come off with the die grinder. We're gonna clean up more of the body, more paint prep, and then we'll go from there. So let's get started on the rust solvent. So the way we're gonna test this is we're just gonna put a piece of masking tape in the middle, we're gonna clean one side, pull the masking tape off, and see how good one side looks versus the other. So for the instructions on the bottle, it says to spray the rust solvent onto the metal, let it sit for a minute or two, and then scrub it really hard with a authentic Scotch-Brite. All right, so it clearly took off a bunch of rust, in the places where I scrubbed really hard. So I'm gonna actually spray it again and leave it sitting for even longer this time, and then come back in a little bit. Now the solvent has been soaking for about half an hour, so we're gonna give it some more scrubs and see if it worked any better. All right, so after a bunch of scrubbing, let's rip that tape off. So it didn't work out as great as I hoped it to. This side, right between this spot weld and over, is wet sanding with the solvent. Right here between this line and that spot weld, this is Scotch-Brite only with the solvent, and then that's nothing. Clear winner is definitely wet sanding with the rust solvent. So I think I'm gonna bump it up to the next level. I'm going to wet sand with the rust solvent and a die grinder instead of doing it by hand, and see if that cuts through the rust a lot faster. Now that we have 4 test subjects, we can see what works the best. So we have none, nothing, just sanding from the previous episode. This is Scotch-Brite and Rust Reformer. This is Scotch-Brite, Rust Reformer, then wet sand with Rust Reformer. And then this one over here is Rust Reformer and die grinder. And actually, I think the best of all of them was the wet sand. This is like the most smooth and the most reflective. I think in general, the rust was removed the most here. This is also smooth and looks pretty good, but this actually took longer than the wet sanding. Another factor I just thought of is that I let the rust reformer sit here for almost a half an hour, and I did not let the rust reformer sit here for very long, maybe 5 minutes. I think in general, I'm going to be doing a combination of the two, kind of, whatever is easiest on the rest of the body and clearing up the rust. So now that I have a rust removing technique down, I'm gonna finish removing all of the paint and rust spots with a die grinder from the engine bay, like we were doing in the last episode, and then I will attack that rust with the rust reformer and the wet sanding. So something I want to do before moving forward is removing these wire harness clips. So these clips are all over the Datsun. And if anyone has ever worked on one of these cars, they'll know that Nissan used these everywhere. I mean, for the wire harness alone right here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a different one, 9. So these little wire harness clips, they're everywhere. And I really hate them. I think they're awfully engineered. They're these tiny slips of metal. You're supposed to put the wire harness in there, and then you bend this metal over the wire harness, which holds it in place. Which sounds fine and looks fine, and I mean, it works. It's worked on all of them, but what happens over time is the wire harness moves around, which causes the paint to ripple, which causes rust to get under here. I mean, if you look at the rust in the engine bay, there's really not that much. But anywhere these clips are, there's tons of rust because, they're warping the body and they're causing water to get to the metal. So I'm gonna remove all of them. The only ones I'm gonna keep are these guys. I like these. These are for the fuel line, and there's only a few of them, but I like those I just really hate the wire harness clips. So I'm gonna get rid of them throughout the entire engine bay. And so then what I'll do is I will 3D model and 3D print new brackets when the car is farther along. I'm really glad I took those off though. You can see that underneath them, there was just so much rust that I wasn't gonna be able to get. And that would have just stayed there, and then I would have painted, and later on it would have just come right back out. So I'm glad I took those off, not only because they're ugly and useless, but because I would have gotten a bad paint job and rust would have come back really quickly. So lots of good things with taking those off. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually using steel wool to get into all the crevices and make sure I got all the rust. Since steel wool is super like form-fitting, unlike die grinders and sandpaper, I'm able to get into the corners really nicely and make sure I didn't, miss any rust. So for example, I use steel wool all up here, and you can see it's super smooth, it's clean, it's easy to tell that there is no more rust left. Versus a spot like down here, it's hard to tell. Maybe that little spot right there, is that dirt? Is that rust? So I'm going to go throughout the entire engine bay and use steel wool in all of these really hard to get spots and make sure I didn't leave any rust. And as well as using steel wool, I'm also going to be using wire brushes. I picked up a pack of 8 off of Amazon and I'm gonna go crazy with them. Crazy! All right, so now the entire driver's side of the engine bay is sanded down, and the last thing to do is derust all the screw holes. So you take these little things, put them in the hole, move them around a little bit, and a bunch of dust will come out. So now I'm going to do that to the rest of the screw holes, and then the driver's side will actually be complete. All right, so now one side is officially done. So a little before and after, well, I guess after and before, you can clearly see the cleanliness versus the dirtiness. Now this isn't ready for paint just yet. There's a few places I'm thinking about bondoing. Like here where one of these wire harness clips were, when I grinded it out, I left a dent in the metal. And so I was thinking about bondoing those kind of little dents everywhere. So it looks a little bit more seamless. Another thing that I've seen other people bondo are all these spot welds. They'll sand them down and then they'll bondo over them so that when the engine bay gets painted, everything is really smooth, but I don't think I'm gonna do that because it's original and it's part of the Datsun 240z's. The one thing I am going to do is get rid of the sharp bits from all the spot welds. There's a few spot welds that have these really sharp pieces off them. And so now I wanna move to the next side and get the rest of the engine bay finished so that we can primer it and then paint it. But there's a few things kind of holding me back and a few things that I'm not really sure about. Those things are the battery tray and the gas line holders. Like I did on the rest of the engine, I took off the wire harness holders and underneath them, there was a ton of rust. I still haven't cleaned up after them and you can see it here. So I'm worried that these gas line clips will also have that rust and debris because it's not a solid piece, it's spot welded. And then anywhere that's not a spot weld is essentially not bonded to the metal, debris can get under there and cause rust buildup. And then I'm also wondering about the battery tray. And that's because it's the same thing where the spot welds and there's a lot of area for debris buildup. It even bends up high enough here where like I can feel there's a lot of dirt back here. I kind of want to like search and see what other people have done in their builds because maybe taking off the battery tray is kind of like normal. All right, so it's official. We have to take the battery tray out. That's what other people are saying, which means we also have to take the gas line holders out. I'm really unattractive from this angle. Look like a thumb. Okay, so we're gonna remove the battery tray, but we're going to try and not break it or bend it at all because we're gonna get measurements of it and I might try and make something later on to replace it. So to get it out, we have 1, 2, 3 spot welds, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 spotless welds. All right, now the battery tray is loose, and look at this mess. Ooh! Well, that's crazy. I almost left this thing in. Look, I see under the top, bare metal. Oh my God. Well, now these little gas clips are definitely coming out. And the last thing I'm gonna remove in the engine bay is the hood latch holder. I wasn't going to remove this, but there's a bunch of rust and I already see it coming out. I'm already taking everything else out, might as well take this out too. It was a little bit more difficult than I wanted it to be. It had a total of 8 spot welds on the bottom and then 4 on top. And the bottom stuck. All of these were a little bit bigger than these ones, so my drill bit didn't get them and I ended up having to wiggle it out. There were some dark rust spots forming in the bottom here. And if we didn't take this out and then we painted on top of it, eventually, when cleaning the engine bay, water would get in here, rust would seep down on top of the paint. It would just look like crap. I'm glad we took out all these bits. This engine bay is gonna look beautiful. It'll be solid, it'll be rust free. So now these are all the pieces from this episode. Oh, and these. Probably like 100 spot welds drilled out. This piece would look pretty cool, carbon fiber. So I think that's gonna be it for this episode. I was hoping we were gonna get the entire engine bay cleared out and sanded, but with having to take out the battery tray and the wire harness clips and all those little bits, that added on so much time. But I'm gonna try to put an episode out every single week on Sundays in the morning. This is because of 2 things. Because I wanna get the Datsun done ASAP. And 2, because you guys have been asking for more regular videos. So I am going to put in as much time every single week as I possibly can into this build to make more videos for you guys. One last note before I sign off. Today is not Sunday, but the day that this video is being released is on Sunday. And this Sunday, November 22nd, I'm going to be picking up something fun. If you want to see what I'm picking up, check out my Instagram. I will probably post things to my story. And in the next episode, I will quickly show you guys what it is that I got. So until then, I am BradBuilds, who builds, and my name is Brad. And I will catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Hey, can you please like, comment, subscribe on my channel? What? Hey, can you guys like, comment, subscribe this video? Please like, comment, and subscribe.